L.A. Marzulli is a supernaturalist researcher who lectures on the subjects of UFOs and the Nephilim, ancient prophetic texts, and presents his research at conferences and churches and media appearances and interviews on numerous national and international radio and television programs. He's written 13 books and he has produced 27 film documentaries dealing with these paranormal and UFO issues.
You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, welcome, LA, to Exopolitics Today.
Thank you for having me back on. My pleasure.
Well, it is great to have you back, and I know you've been very busy, and you are a prolific kind of producer of these television film documentaries. So, yeah, we're going to talk about a couple of those today. So, I wanted to start off with the this out-of-place artifacts. I mean, that's the 8th in a series on the trail of the Nephilim, that you've called it out-of-place artifacts. So, yeah, why don't you just explain what you mean by that?
Well, when we travel the world, we find things sometimes and find artifacts. And you kind of look at the artifact and you go, and that doesn't really belong here. Something's amiss. I know, the guy, the docent, is mouthing off the party line, but I'm not buying it for a second. And that's really what the film is about. One of the most extraordinary ones, in my opinion, is the Vatican Obelisk. I mean, it's in plain sight. It's right there. And I'll never forget when I was in Vatican Square, and I'm walking up to this thing, and I'm kind of going like, something's wrong here. Something's fishy. I don't know what it is. So I go back online. I do a deep dive on it, and lo and behold, this thing is thousands of years old. Caesar Augustus brought it over from Heliopolis. There's not a hieroglyphic on it. Nobody knows where it came from, but as legend goes, it's Heliopolis in Egypt, and Caesar Augustus carts this thing. And this thing's, 83 feet tall, 320 tons. This is not, yeah, there it is. This is not this, a nice little cute rock that somebody decides to, bring over. It's just incredible. And there's a lot wrong with it. It's one thing to try to cut something 4,000 years ago, and mainstream archaeologists will tell us you can get a carpet saw, you can put sand in the groove, and you can cut granite with it. And you're not going to get an argument from me. And I get that. But how do you do this? How do you make this? And then why? Why do you need a 320-ton monument? And it was carted into Rome by Caesar Augustus. Caligula had it moved to what became a circus. Then the Vatican took over that area. And roughly in 1586, Pope Sixtus the fifth, the fifth, I think, decides to move the thing about 300 yards because it's in the way. So he begins to move it. It's 900 men and it's 300 horses, and depending on which account you want to read, it's 3 months, it's 6 months, it's 9 months, it's ropes, it's pulleys. It's a huge production to move this thing. And then what's really telling is the Pope comes out and does a rite of exorcism around it. Why does he do that? Why does the Pope feel like he needs to do a rite of exorcism? Well, in my wheelhouse, what I call this, and I call it in the film, this is Nephilim architecture, fallen angel technology. What I mean by that, these are the watchers. So when I say angel, just move that to the side because immediately people have these preconceived notions. These are interdimensional, extra-dimensional entities which are messing with the genome, and they bring knowledge with them. They bring lots of knowledge with them. They do all sorts of stuff. They can manipulate space, time, matter, and energy just in the same way we find in ufology and modernity, same thing. Are they the same guys? In my opinion, they are, but I digress. So going back to this thing, an obelisk changes as you go up. Every centimeter you go up, the everything's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So, theoretically, you can take a chalk line and go dink and then dink on the other side, and you can kind of do that. But are we looking at pounding a granite slab with a bunch of rocks and then polishing it? I mean, we're really supposed to believe that? Copper saws? I mean, how does this work? And with so much of the archaeologists, they'll show one guy with a copper saw on a granite block, small granite block, and they go, see, we can cut the granite. Okay, I get that. But show me how you make an obelisk like this that is absolutely pristine. And when you're there, and I spent like a couple of hours just walking around the thing, looking at it. It's mind-boggling. And again, in 1586, if this is so easy to move and do, why does it take 3 months or 6 months to move it a couple hundred yards? It's just,
yeah. Well, my question with this is that the obelisk is there. I mean, obviously, it has certain occult significance, and
yeah,
what is underneath it? I mean, because I know the Vatican has a lot of these secret tunnels. I mean, there is I'm sure you know of him, the Vatican exorcist who wrote about these satanic rituals happening at the Vatican. Is this obelisk used by these kind of Satanists that are operating or controlling the Vatican in these underground ceremonies? Is that what the obelisk's true purpose is, or one of its purposes?
Well, it's interesting because Pope Sixtus did a rite of exorcism on it. So on some level, he had to know what he was dealing with. Whether he knew about the Nephilim, of course, is conjecture. I've never been able to read if he has any memoirs. And, you're talking about the novel Windswept House, which was incredible. That's the late Father Martin. And I've read the novel, and I've listened to his research on Coast to Coast when he was on before he died. And there was a ritual that was done in St. John's Cathedral years ago, allegedly. No, we don't know. I mean, we just, with a lot of this stuff, and I keep it on the back burner because unless I can really prove it in some way, it's conjecture, it's hearsay. And as a journalist, as a researcher, I can say, well, I feel safe in going, this is what the conspiracy theorists tell us, but can we prove it or not? They're the balloons, yay! And I can't, so I really don't go with it. I'm very familiar with Windswept House and the work of Martin. To say I'm a student of him would be that's a fair statement. I do find it interesting. There are scandals, but there are scandals all through, any human endeavor, no matter what it is, religious, non-religious, there's scandals. It's like the human soul seems to have this little fault which leans towards depravity on some level. So it's a mixed bag. You got a lot of good in humanity, but you got a lot of nonsense going on too. So are there satanic rituals going? I've talked to allegedly SRA victims, satanic ritual abuse victims, who talk about this, talk about the tunnels, talk about the abuse, talk about the child sacrifice. Can I prove that? No, I can't. Whistleblowers, alleged whistleblowers, have come forward. But we have to take this extremely carefully. I mean, you're talking about accusations like this are incredibly damning to some people. What if they're not doing it? What if it's a canard? The whole thing's a ruse, which I don't believe either. So I keep stuff like this on the back burner. I mean, I just do. I just keep it on the back burner until I have more information. So I know about it. I've never really written about it because I don't have enough information. Again, I've read Martin's stuff, and there are Vatican exorcists that are there. The demonic realm is very real, all too very real. Is it a mixed bag? In my opinion, it is a mixed bag on some level. Are there pedophile priests? There's no doubt about that. There's absolutely no doubt. Priests have been defrocked and removed and the whole deal, or moved to another parish. So we know the reality of some of that. People have gone missing. It's And what people need to understand, and I'm going to go way out on a limb here, this is not my version of Christianity, just so you know. This is the workings and the trappings of men. Much of what they believe, not most, but much of what they believe is not sourced in the biblical narrative. They are amillennialists, which means that they don't believe in a literal millennial kingdom. They're not looking for the return of Yeshua. They're not. And yet we know that that's written in documents that are 2,000 years old. I mean, we know that. So there's a game plan. It's a man-made construct. And I don't want to start bagging on Catholics here, but I guess I already am. So I'll continue a little bit. The whole construct of the Catholic Mass is nowhere found in the biblical narrative. It's just not there. The idea of transubstantiation, which Catholics will defend to the nines, nowhere can you find that. It says, do this in remembrance of me. It's not, when Jesus says, I mean, it's a 3-hour conversation. I don't know if you guys want to go here or not. Let me wrap it up by saying this. It's a Passover meal, first of all, where they get this from. So it's a Jewish Passover meal. It's a Seder. And so when Jesus breaks the bread, right, he's breaking the bread. That's the afikomen. And part of the afikomen is hidden away to the end of the Seder meal. If you've never gone to a Seder meal, it's an eye-opener. It's mind-boggling. So Jesus isn't saying, eat my flesh, drink my blood. And he's certainly not saying, it's all symbolic at that point in the context of a Jewish Seder meal. It has nothing to do, with all due respects to Catholic, believe what you want to believe, but it has nothing to do with a priest and a host standing up, ringing a bell, and then going, the transubstantiation. This is a man-made construct, and that's what I take umbrage with.
Well, what I'd kind of like to just explore with you here, because I know you talk about the Nephilim, you talk about the fallen angels. I've done a lot of research, and there are others that talk about these these Draco Reptilian beings who are worshipped by the elite, and that a lot of these SRA rituals are done to call on these reptilians who are, I'm sure you're aware of David Icke and how these beings are like fourth, fifth dimensional and come into our frequency. So, are these satanic ritual abuses, are these really just a way of calling in these reptilian draconian beings, which others might call fallen angels or Nephilim?
Yeah, the short answer to that is yes, but it's very complex. And it's just to say yes is sort of disingenuous on my part, because it's a very complex phenomena. And for instance, when was the last time anybody sat down with a reptilian and asked them 20 questions on camera? It's just not going to happen. So, we see little snippets. We get snippets from people. I mean, we published a book by Karen Wilkinson, Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. And Karen was taken by them from 6 years old. She had 3 children by them. They came and took the child. She knows about reptilians. I mean, she's seen them. Her handler on the ship was human looking, but when he decloaked, he was not human. Yeah, when you say that to people, it's like, ew, it's very much woo-woo. But we've had too many people come forward that say the same thing. And again, when was the last time anyone sat down with a mantis or a tall white? I mean, pick your and able to ask any questions. I mean, there are rumors with the Eisenhower and the Holloman base, which I believe happened. There are rumors that we've heard. People have come up to me at conferences, and they'll go, "Can I speak to you privately?" And I'll go, "Sure." And they'll look at me, and I'm a student of body language, and they will tell me right off, "I'm working in an underground base next to aliens. I can't say anything to anybody, nor can you, but it's real, and I'm doing it, and I have no place to go. But I respect your work, and that's what I'm telling you." Then they walk backwards into the crowd, never see him again. So what do you do with that? The guy's a whistleblower. He's terrified. I mean, he's absolutely terrified. So, I mean, it's a very complex, hidden agenda, and a lot of it's speculation. But what bothers me about it is that it's done in darkness, that you are taken against your will, you're raped essentially, you're abused, and I get it. There's this dual. I mean, you can talk to Preston Dennett's Dolly, and you'll get a completely different narrative about this than you will our Karen Wilkinson. So, but they're both on board the ship. Karen, like Dolly, learned to fly the ship she was taught by her handler. That's what she calls them. She was taught by her handler how to fly the ship, just like Dolly was in Preston Dennett's book. So we have two witnesses talking about the same thing. And we know that, thank you for the balloons. And we know that Dolly has a completely different take than Karen does. We know that. I mean, I would love to get the two of them together. It'd be a fascinating conversation. Karen believes, like I do, that there's a real nefarious agenda here. Dr. David Jacobs, his book, Walking Amongst Us, believe that there's a nefarious agenda here. Dr. Roger Lear, when we took out the implant, and what happened with that. I mean, we're one of the only teams on the planet that's still in existence that took out an implant. And that was high strangeness in the operating room that day. High strangeness, no doubt about it. So it's a very complex narrative.
So, LA, I know you've visited Peru and you've seen some of the Ooparts there. So, how important is Peru in terms of this whole Ooparts phenomenon?
Well, there are so much that's there that is just completely out of place. I mean, I'll just start with something like when you go to Ollantaytambo and something cataclysmic has happened and it's thrown whatever this building was. Archaeologists always go, the Temple of the Sun. Wait, you don't know what they called it. Stop making names. Why can't you just say, well, it might have been called this, but we really don't know. So in my opinion, that's intellectually, that's very disingenuous. You don't know what they call this thing. You don't even know who built it. You'll tell us the Inca built it, but the Inca had nothing to do with this. You get down below, and there's this very large stone, which is andesite, which is really, really hard. And you can't cut andesite with a copper chisel. I mean, you just can't do it. I'm going to see if I can find one of the shots here, because it's just mind-boggling. I mean, it really is. And you look at it and you kind of go, something else is going on here, because you just can't make a structure like this. I mean, if you can't cut it, then you can't cut it. And so how is this done? And more importantly, who made it and why? It seems to be. So I'm desperately trying to find this stupid thing. It's whatever this thing is. Yeah, here we go. So whatever it is, it was done with absolute precision, and no one knows why. I mean, no one knows. Well, why did they do this? What's the point of making this object? And no one has an answer for it that I'm aware of. I mean, it's absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, we really don't know. I mean, what boggles my mind, and I'm actually working on a theory on this, wherever I've been, it's the same story endlessly repeated. Well, whoever these people were, they came in, they built something, they built a structure, and they built in ways that make no sense at all, because how do you cut andesite stone in the Bronze Age? I mean, how do you do that when you got a copper chisel? You can't. We actually demonstrated in the film out of place artifacts. So how is that done? If you can't do it, then you can't do it. So who's the pseudo archaeologist creating this whole narrative? And we don't even know whether it's true. Look, to your point, Michael, they may have been sun worshipers. Okay, they may have been that, but there's something else going on. All these sites, whether it's Tiwanaku, whether it's Pumapunku, Ollantaytambo, all down in South America. But then you get the same thing up here, or you go to the Standing Stones in Karnak, or you go to Gilgal Raphaim or Menga in Spain, or any place. You hear the same thing. Well, something happened, and these people just disappeared into the indigenous population due to climate change. The Mexican government doesn't know who built Tiwanaku. They don't know. I'm not Tiwanaku, Teotihuacan. They don't know who built Teotihuacan. They call them the Teotihuacos. That's what they call them. But they don't know that the people who built this, what they called themselves. The people in Corral, Peru, the oldest city in America, 5,000 years old, they have no idea what these people call themselves. And there's this area there where they won't let you go. At least I've been there, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. They never allow you to go up to this one area. It looks just like, to me, and there's aerial photographs of it by a drone that was illegally flown over it, but it looks like, there are the balloons again. Wow, so bizarre. Guys, I'm just talking. I'll keep my hands up the rest of the time. I have no idea. Somebody's method was it, that's for sure. But when you go to Corral and you see this structure, it looks like a kiva from Chaco Canyon, except it's not a kiva from Chaco Canyon, but it looks just like it. It's underground. And that's what the kivas are. And you hear the same story. Well, these people built these sites and they left because of climate change. And they assimilated into the indigenous population. You don't know that. They don't know where these people, look, in the Hopo culture, Hopo was a farmer. So they don't know, modern day archaeologists have no idea of what the so-called Hopewell, who built all these amazing earthworks in Ohio, no idea what they actually call themselves. And the party line is, well, they blended into the indigenous population. Well, if that's true, where are Native Americans' oral tradition stating that, 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, we had an event, a star, something, a supernova, whatever, I don't know. And these people from an unknown land wanted to join our clan. It's not there in the oral tradition. It's not, that I'm aware of. And there's no buffalo skin or oral tradition or anything that would show us that the Hopewell, which, who knows, never saying it was the Shawnee, the ancestors of the Shawnee. But we've got the same Chief Wallace, about 15 years ago in an article that she wrote stating that, no, the Shawnee did not build these artifacts. They were here when we got here. Then she's flip-flopped. Now she's saying our ancestors were Morven geniuses. We've got information which we will release probably February of next year. We're in post-production, but we've got 3 films before we get to that. And what we discovered was an incredible link to the old world, which is not a coincidence. I'll just leave it at that. And we see this connectivity, so-called grid of the gods type of deal, which manifests everywhere. I don't know who's doing the balloons, but oh yeah, we have been officially hacked. So
one of the kind of artifacts that you have talked about in this film Ooparts on the tribe of the Nephilim is this you call it the Nephilim Lance. So what is that?
I will show you. This man, Robert Shelley, brought it to us, and we were just blown away by what we were looking at. And when I saw it at first, I said, oh, that's a sword. And immediately, Chief Joseph said, no, it's not a sword. It's a lance. And that's what it looks like.
Okay.
And it's 28 pounds, which ties into the biblical narrative. Ishbi-Benob's spear was about 28 pounds. So it's very heavy. The Kandahar giant's lance was about that long. It was about 3 feet long. And you can skewer 3 men. The Nephilim, the Kandahar giant was about 12 to 14 feet tall. I've got multiple witnesses on this now, which is kind of mind-boggling, actually. And one guy in particular was called after they killed the first giant to go in and investigate, and that's a whole other story. He told me off the record what happened, ex-military guy. But when the giant of Kandahar came out, he was brandishing a very large lance like this. So this is the stuff that makes wonderful bedtime reading. So Shelley gave us the lance, actually gave Chief Joseph the lance, just gave it to him. And are there attachments with this lance? More than likely. More than likely there's stuff on it, possible curses. I mean, you know, this stuff is real. And so I said, Chief, we need to do a metallurgy test on it. He said, sure. So we take a little corner from the hilt, just a little corner, like a small piece, about that big, about the end of my pinky. About let me get it in front of the camera here. About that big, a very small piece of a lance. We take it to a very high-tech lab in the Midwest, and we meet and greet, and we say, hey, we've got this artifact. We'd like to know the age, where the copper comes from, blah, blah, blah. The woman is very vivacious, very friendly, very open. Tell us, yeah, we can probably pinpoint where the copper came from, the age of it. We can tell a lot. So we're supposed to have the results in a couple of weeks. Month goes by. Now it's like maybe 6 weeks. Finally, we arrive at the lab. She's there with a PR person. They won't allow us to film. And the woman, the tech, is not allowed to talk to us. If we ask a question, it's got to go through her handler. And so we're in a room, and really weird, really strange. And the bottom line is she's very coy and very nervous, and everything runs through the handler. And her bottom line is, well, this is no different than any copper artifact that you would find in modernity. So as things have it, I'm speaking at a conference, and I talk about this and how if there are any metallurgists in the audience, we're looking to get another test on this. Lo and behold, Christian Widner comes up to me, top-notch metallurgist. Yeah, there you go. Except they're lances, they're spears. They're not swords, they're spears. And Christian says, you know, we've got a lab. Let me get a sample, and I'll see what we can do. Well, in the film, we show that there seems to be a Middle Eastern connection, which is our wheelhouse, because we believe that the Nephilim came over to the New World about 3,000 years ago, roughly. And we have artifacts that seem to prove that. So that's what we think. And this artifact, while the isotopic ratio can be found in Michigan, it also can be found in Saudi Arabia. So which is it? You know, which is it? And we don't know.
Well, that Middle East connection with the Nephilim is fascinating. I mean,
yeah.
you've pointed out that the Nephilim are kind of like these giant hybrid offspring of the fallen angels. So with this Middle East connection, I mean, it's worth kind of like bringing up what's happening right now. I mean, is this conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis, is that just a kind of geopolitical event that dates back to the Balfour Declaration, at the end of the 18th century, early 1900s, or is this connected to this kind of ancient battle between the Israelites and the kind of like the progeny of the Nephilim? Because the Bible talks about, or the Old Testament talks about, the Israelites being commanded to wipe out the giants or the Nephilim. So, yeah, is this what the conflict is all about?
It's not either or, it's both and. They were told to wipe out the giants in Gaza, and they never did that. They never did that. So it's come back to bite them. And remember, when you say, well, isn't that genocide? The Nephilim are entities that are soulless. They have no soul, in my opinion. They are soulless. They are in a fixed state. They are the progeny of the Watchers and the human women of Earth, creating a hybrid being. Now, what does that sound like to you? What is going on in the breeding program right now? When women are taken, they're impregnated, and then the 3rd month of pregnancy, they're re-abducted, and the baby is taken from them. We get into this in our cattle mutilation film. I believe that entity is then put into an artificial womb. The blood of a cow can be used in a human transfusion. So these entities are creating artificial wombs to grow the hybrids in. And for some of you out there who have never traveled in this, that sounds incredibly bizarre. And I agree, it is. But these when you take a child from a mother's womb, or an entity that's 3 months old, it can't live outside that womb for too long. It just can't. You've got to put it into some sort of an artificial womb. And as we show in the film, artificial wombs are being constructed. This is the new deal. They're already talking about it. And cow's blood can be used in human transfusion. So it's not only that the Israelites were commanded thousands of years ago to wipe the Nephilim out in Gaza, and they failed to do so. There's also this whole thing, an idea of the faulty two-state solution, where Israel gives land, wow, land for peace, which they did in Gaza. And according to Dave Gordon, IDF soldier, when they gave the land for peace, as they're coming out of Gaza, the mortar fire started. So they give up the land, there is no peace. What most people don't understand is the history here, that this entire region was controlled by the Ottoman Turks before 1917. And the Ottoman Empire stretched from Turkey all the way down into the Middle East, all the way through Northern Africa. So you get Algiers and Egypt and everything in Northern Africa. It's a strip. It's all controlled by the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottoman Empire, the Turks side with Germany. Germany loses the war. So the Brits and the French come in to the Turkish Empire, to the Ottoman Empire, which was there about 400 years. And they create out of thin air the modern states of Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine, out of thin air. The boundaries make no sense. They're not taking in consideration Sunni, Shia. They appoint 3 Hashemite kings. One is in Lebanon, one is in Syria, the other is in Jordan. The Hashemites have traced their descendancy from the Prophet Muhammad. So the only Hashemite king left is the king of Jordan, who is a Hashemite king. That's it. Iraq and Syria, the Hashemite kings were deposed by the Ba'ath Party in both countries. So if the so-called Jews have no right to the land, I used to have, before the house fire here, which burned us out completely, and we've rebuilt, by the way, so it's all good. But I had a pamphlet, a recreation of one from 1921, right in that window of time, from the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. The Grand Mufti is like the head honcho, the big cheese of Jerusalem, who's obviously a Muslim, who in this paper states unequivocally that the Temple Mount, the remains of the Temple Mount, is a Jewish edifice. It has nothing to do at all with Islam. Nothing at all. Islam later adopted it and made this whole thing about Muhammad ascending into heaven on the Temple Mount. But the Temple Mount, according to the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, was built and created. That's where the Temple of Solomon stood. So and you'll get the argument that these are the Khazarians. And again, people need to do their homework. There's always been a Jewish presence throughout the Middle East after diaspora. Diaspora happened. Titus and the crew come down in AD 70, but then there's the Bar Kokhba revolt, which happens in AD 125. When the Romans come in this time, they're not screwing around. So there's an edict. No Jew is allowed in Jerusalem at all till basically the year 300, when Constantine goes in and then takes this whole thing and, is this what happened here? Is this what happened here? So the whole thing just goes completely off the rails at that point. So if the Jews have no right to the land, then no one else does either. Let's all give it back to the Ottoman Turks. We'll displace everybody to Canada, and everybody will just live happily ever after. But that's not what's going to happen.
Well, you said a few kind of really intriguing things there. Firstly, as far as the Nephilim being soulless beings, there's another possibility here that the Nephilim are merely avatar bodies. Yeah. That these are bodies that extraterrestrials can use at different times. So you can have, like, and you mentioned that the Nephilim in the Gaza Strip were never killed off or removed. That there could be Nephilim there, kind of like giants underneath somewhere, and that these are, I don't know, worshipped, protected, or whatever. And at some point, these giants will kind of resuscitate themselves. So you kind of already answered that question. You said that this present-day conflict we're seeing in Israel and Palestine, that this is just a repetition of something that goes back hundreds, many centuries, even thousands of years.
Well, that is true. There's also the prophetic implications that we see in the guidebook of a supernatural, i.e. the Bible, the biblical prophetic narrative. Psalm 83 talks very specifically about what we're looking at now, very, very specifically, naming it, in the end times, and it's very, very specific. It's not like a fuzzy Nostradamus quatrain. It's extremely specific. And Israel has been regathered back into its land, which is what happened in 1948, and they expand their boundaries. Israel last week saber-rattled to the Iranians and said, if Hezbollah decides to attack us, or you attack, we'll destroy Damascus. That's Isaiah 17. Isaiah is an ancient prophet. He wrote about that. In Isaiah 17, chapter 17, he states Damascus is no more. Damascus is a ruinous heap. That's never happened. In the history of the world, Damascus is the oldest city on the planet. It's over 5,000 years old. Continuously inhabited city. Very, very old. Now, the area around Damascus it's basically been reduced to rubble. There's nothing there. I've seen drone footage of it. I mean, it's just to no man's land. But Damascus proper is still intact. It still is the capital of Syria, and they are playing with fire. Hezbollah and Iran's proxy in Syria doing the same thing. They're lobbing missiles over, mortar fire over, attack drones over. At some point, the IDF may open up a two-front war. Right now, we're looking at Gaza, and they're defending the northern border. But if they open up a two-front war, are we looking at Psalm 83? And the short answer to that is very possible, which has never been fulfilled. Are we looking at the destruction of Isaiah, which is or destruction of Damascus, which is Isaiah 17? That's never happened. So for those of us who travel in the biblical prophetic narrative, I, for one, I'm certainly one of them. I'm every day I go to Raptor, like a Raptor, like a Raptor, Raptor News from Israel. It's very, very thorough, no BS, no hype. It's from a military perspective and tells exactly where the skirmishes were, what happened, who did what, who flew what, and where it might be going. Raptor News is definitely worth going to. But all this leads up to, and can lead up to, another prophetic text, which is called the Ezekiel 38:39 text. And then you get the wild cards of Russia and Turkey and Iran. Those three nations are listed in the Ezekiel 38:39 prophecy, verbatim. So you've got, remember, this thing's written like a couple thousand years ago. So, this is end time stuff. There's no doubt about it. There's absolutely no doubt. And it can't happen until Israel is regathered back into the homeland, which is 1948. And so I wrote about this in the Cosmic Chess Match. Out of the ashes of the Holocaust, you get the rise of this tiny little nation state, Israel. You get the Balfour Declaration. You get the UN voting for Israel by one vote. Russia voted for them. It's just incredible. And so the Jews, get their homeland. You also see the absolute virulent rise of anti-Semitism and false flags, false news reporting, like with the hospital. What happened? The attack came from Hamas on the last day of Yom Kippur, the highest Jewish holiday of the year. That, and on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. That in itself was extremely important. It's very, very deliberate. And babies were decapitated. I mean, the atrocities that happened, and once Netanyahu got wind of that, that's when he declared war. So it's like you say, it's an ancient hatred that won't go away. And for the
in a way, what you've described is kind of like what many others believe is happening right now. That it's an ancient conflict, the two sides, the Israelis and the Palestinians. It's just the latest kind of like stage, or the latest kind of like event of something that's been playing out for a long time. And that you've mentioned biblical prophecy, the book of Revelations, which this seems to be fulfilling that. So some people say that what we're seeing now is exactly what was described in the book of Revelations, that is prophecy being manifested. But there's another possibility here, and I want you to explore that this conflict is being staged by a third force. You can call them the Cabal, the Illuminati, and they're using the book of Revelations as a template to stage or manipulate global events to make things happen or unfold in a way that is consistent with the book of Revelations. And the evidence for that is what Seymour Hersh, I'm sure you're aware of him, the famous investigative reporter, he described how 2 out of the 3 Israeli army battalions that were guarding the Gaza border, 2 of those 3 were moved out only days before to the West Bank on some contrived pretext. So, that is, to my mind, evidence that this attack was allowed to happen, that there's a third force allowing the attack to happen because they want to create, this book of Revelations, Gog versus Magog, end times, Third World War.
And, and that's the stuff of a conspiracy theory, and I get that, and I'm familiar with that because I heard it too. And I follow all this stuff. We're not in what we're in right now is Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, which leads up to Ezekiel 38. We're not in the book of Revelation, not even close to it, not even close to it yet. So all this stuff has to transpire before we get to the 7 years of Jacob's trouble. It's a whole deal. Let me read you something here. The word of the Lord came to me, son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Meshech and Tubal is Turkey. Prophesy against him, saying, this is what the sovereign Lord says, I am against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you out. And it goes on from there. So Magog, according to first century Jewish historian Josephus, the land of Magog was inhabited by the Scythians. The Scythians are the Stans, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Rosh is the remote north. Magog is Russia, at least part of Russia. Meshech and Tubal is Turkey. I mean, Persia is the land of modern-day Iran. Kush is actually modern-day Ethiopia, and also the land south of Egypt. Put is also Libya. Gomer is part of Turkey. So what's bizarre is the specificity in which what was written. So in other words, if that's true, that there's a third party that's manipulating events to create this, it's still prophecy being fulfilled, which begs the question, why do they want this to happen? I mean, why would you do this for what end, to what means? I mean, even if you can manipulate it to the point where, okay, we're going to manipulate this so prophecy will be fulfilled, why would you do this, pray tell? To create a one world government? Well, we know that that's going to happen anyway. There will be a one world government, a one world religious system. I mean, that was prophesied thousands of years ago.
Well, I think the answer to that question is that these beings that are manipulating these conflicts, I mean, they're looking for something called loosh, or this kind of energy that comes out of, the hatred, the animosity that's generated through these wars. And what I find interesting is that both on the Palestinian side and on the Israeli side, both of those have peacemakers. But what's happened is that the peacemakers have been marginalized. They've been removed into out of the picture. And what you have is, the extremists on both sides, because Netanyahu is by no means a kind of peacemaker or moderate. I mean, he represents that extreme side of let's solve this conflict with the Palestinians using our overwhelming military force. And then you have on the other side, you have the Hamas, who are extremists. I mean, they are,
no doubt,
and they're extremists, and they absolutely believe that this conflict can be resolved only through military force. And again, it's like, well, that's nonsense. This conflict has to be resolved through peaceful dialogue. But the peacemakers from both sides have been excluded, marginalized, and you have this war. And I think this is what this third party wants. They want that loosh energy because someone is getting it or draining it.
They feed off of fear. There's no doubt about this. But in the Israeli government, it's not like we have a commander-in-chief. Netanyahu's just one of three guys. And, so Netanyahu wants to go in. One of his counterparts does not want to go in. So they're waiting for the third guy to make up his mind to figure out who he's going to side on. Are we going to go, look, when you've got Hezbollah constantly and Gaza firing rockets during a harvest season, they'll send drones over and drop incendiary devices. I mean, this just goes on and on. And I've been to Israel, so I know what it's like. The hatred, the vitriol is very, very deep. And it's very, very real. And I have no solution to it. I will agree with you that there are entities that are pushing this thing and fueling it on some level. There's no doubt in my mind. There is an unseen force that is pushing it. The question is, why now? And so as a student of prophecy, I look at this and I wait. All of this leads up to the return of the king. And I'm not talking the Lord of the Rings here, but all of this leads up to the return of the king, where everything changes. The world as we know it changes. But before that, you go through the time of Jacob's trouble, the 7-year period of tribulation. That is the book of Revelation. And it's unlike any other time in history, so much so that unless those days were shortened, no flesh would survive. So Michael, it's a really complex mix. It's extremely complex. And there's no simple 15-minute answer. There just isn't. I mean, I've been a student of this for 43 years. And the deeper I go, the more I realize how much I don't know and more than likely will never know. So, we watch. I hold on to things very loosely, except for the fundamentals. Those things, okay, this is the base. We work everything from the base. But other than that, it's like, this whole thing could just dissipate. We've seen that happen before. This whole, cooler heads could prevail. Everybody could go, let's go back in our corners. Winter's coming. Let's just chill. But the atrocities on both sides are off the hook. And they are.
Yeah. I agree. Definitely that. So I just want to kind of shift gears now and go to your documentary, the cattle mutilations, the calling card of darkness. So that's the 6th in the series. So, I mean, cattle mutilations, are they still happening? And just describe what's going on right now.
Yeah, in Texas just this year there were a series of cattle mutilations which made national news. It was picked up in all national media, which I found extremely interesting. We did a deep dive with Chuck Zukowski, who's Mr. Cattle Mutilation himself. He took us to several people, Rancher Miller, who had, I believe, 16 cows mutilated in like a 20-year period on his property. And, I'm not sure how much time we have left, but to cut to the chase, I asked Miller on camera, on a level 1 to 10, what's your fear level here? He goes, about an 8. I think he's being trying to tamp it down a little bit. I think it's a 10, but I'm putting words in his mouth. but innate's pretty much up there, and he's gotten used to it on some level. Here's the bottom line. Miller goes out and sees a cow mutilated. It's done with surgical precision. There's no blood left in the animal at all. No blood in the animal at all. Certain parts of the animal have been excised, cut out with surgical precision. Eyes, udders, sex organs, anuses, hearts, brains have been extracted without an entry hole. How's that possible? Eyes, tongues, it's all over the map. And the animal has been placed down in the field. Coyotes won't get near it, and coyotes will eat anything. Scavengers won't get near it. There are no footprints around the animal, not a drop of blood. So the animal is taken. The blood is drained from him first. Then the organs and different parts are carved out with surgical precision. Then the animal is dropped back into the field. Rancher Miller goes out. He sees it. He's freaked out. He brings his wife out. She's fearful. They bring the kids out. They're really scared. Who would do such a thing? They bring the veterinarian out. He's never seen anything like it. So now he's scared. Sheriff, law enforcement comes out. Maybe it's a satanic cult. Yeah, but there's no footprints around here. So how was it done? We don't know. So then they finally bring a local reporter out. He takes pictures of it and writes up a story with the pictures in a local paper. Fear, 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 rings of fear, just all around everybody and everything. And that is the calling card of darkness. In fact, in the film, I look right at the camera and I say, there's no happy ending here, folks, because there isn't. There's no, there's no benevolent space brothers going, hey, we took your cow because we needed blah, 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 blah. It's deliberate. And when I asked Chuck Zukowski at the end of the film, I say, Chuck, do you think this is benevolent or malevolent? Chuck looks right at me and he goes, whoever they are, if I go on an investigation, he's packing a gun. And then, of course, he spills the beans. I wasn't even going to go there with the human mutilation aspect of it, but Chuck does. And he talks about, I know of two such cases, one in Pennsylvania. I forget where the other one was. And Chuck's third case was up in Canada, where like a Mountie or a police officer, highway patrol guy, there's a car on the side of the road. He goes over, knocks on the windshield. There's a woman slumped over the steering wheel like this. She seems to be dead. He calls their version of the coroner. Coroner comes out. They open up the car door. Upon examination, her innards have been cored out. She's been mutilated just like a cow. So this is really grisly, really dark, dark, dark stuff. And who would do such a thing? So there's the cattle mutilations, but there's also the very dark side of it, which, of course, is the human mutilation. And I believe that they are taking this genetic material and creating artificial wombs for the hybrids gestation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think William Cooper was one of the first to talk about these agreements that had been reached between the U.S., the Majestic 12 group and these grey aliens, where the greys would take a limited number of humans, abduct them for genetic experiments, and they would also be allowed to take cattle. So you have the agreement, and there was also an Air Force veteran, Dan Sherman, who wrote Above Top Secret, Above Black, something like that. And he also talked about the agreement. So I think, who's allowing this? Well, yeah, there's an agreement, a secret agreement between elements of the U.S. government and these grey extraterrestrials for these abductions to happen and the cattle mutilations to happen. That's my guess.
And it is mine too. There seems to be this quid pro quo where we have no say in it at all. But the powers that be, we got the ships because I believe Bob Lazar story that they were working on back engineering the propulsion system at S4, which is included in Area 51. And they did this. The Book of Enoch says the same thing. But the Watchers come down, they give technology, albeit it's primitive technology, to mankind for access to the population. I mean, it's the same stinking thing going on. And this is why there's a prophecy that says it'll be like the days of Noah. Well, what differentiates the days of Noah? The book of Enoch are the watchers coming down, mingling their seed. And that's precisely what we see with the abduction phenomena, the mingling of the seed between the watchers and the human woman, creating a hybrid being, walking amongst us, Dr. John Mack's work, Dr. David Jacobs' work, and others. I mean, there's no Dr. Roger Lear's work, our work. I mean, there's definitely a mingling of the seed. The book that we published from Karen Wilkinson, Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. And she was taken from a very early age, like we're talking 6 years old, and impregnated by them 3 different times.
Well, you mentioned the Book of Enoch, and I think
Right.
it's worth kind of pointing out that there's 3 kind of books of Enoch that have discussed, and in I believe it's the Slavonic Book of Enoch, where it discusses that Enoch, when he went up to the heavens and he saw the Ancient of Days and spent time with all of the cherubim and the seraphim and stuff, that he brought back 360 books of knowledge that had to be preserved through the Great Flood. And so that at the end of the day, those books of knowledge would then be used to kind of like bring the ancient wisdom back to humanity. So yeah, so I guess it's maybe you want to just clarify, distinguish. On the one hand, there's the knowledge that the corrupt ones, you call them the Nephilim, the sons of Belial, used to corrupt humanity. But on the other hand, there's the sacred knowledge that's used to kind of like rebuild humanity. So yeah, you want to, what makes the difference between those two?
This is a really go-to book. It's by Gary Wayne. It's a very thick tome, The Genesis Conspiracy, and Gary gets into all of this in the pages of the book. I'm doing a deep dive on it, and I've got all sorts of thick notes in the back and things underlined in pages, and a lot of research in here. He's actually got a sequel to it. And Gary appeared on our Armor Trail of a Nephilim series, but it's a mix. He's an academic, and he's a top-notch researcher. I mean, really, it's an amazing book. Out of all the books on the Watchers and Enoch and the whole antediluvian flood, this is my new go-to book because it's so in depth. It's a type of book where you can get lost in the footnotes, literally lost in the footnotes, and follow his research. So even though I'm reading it one time through, and I can call him, pick up the phone and call him, I've got his number, and I do. I call him and say, well, what about this? What about that? So to get into the ancient wisdom, he addresses that, but he calls it spurious wisdom. So he takes a completely different turn than you do. He thinks that, the Watchers and in other words, he thinks some of it's corrupted. What some people say Enoch brought back, well, maybe Enoch didn't bring that back. Maybe that's an add-on. That's why I go to the R.H. Charles version of Enoch, and then only Enoch 1. It seems really clear that there's this quid pro quo going on between the Watchers and the human people, and they're trading for access to the population. They're giving technology for the access to the population. For instance, you talk about ancient knowledge. Well, it's one of the Watcher angels, Sariel, gives the course of the moon. That's ancient wisdom, the course of the moon. No one knew that, and it was just given to mankind. I mean, you go back to the days of Noah, they didn't know it was an 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. I mean, this is why when circling all the way back to the Hopewell Indians and the Newark earthworks, that site is built on an 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. The Octagon Mound shows the lunar standstill when that moon comes right into the gate. Every 18-and-a-half years, it happens in 2025 and then goes back up. The lunar standstill sits in the gate, and the octagon encompasses 50 acres of land. So the octagon goes into a gate, and then the gate goes into a circle, and the observation platform is in the circle. So you stand in a circle, look through the gate, There's the octagon, and there's the lunar stanza, which comes like this. But the octagon is an unequal octagon, and there are gates within the octagon showing equinoxes and other phases of this 18.5-year cycle. Well, according to the book of Enoch, that was just given to mankind. And this is where the whole Shawnee narrative breaks down. If you know about an 18.5-year lunar cycle, where is it? And how do you build an octagon, an unequal octagon that encompasses 50 acres? How do you check your work? So we brought in a mathematician who teaches math on the collegiate level, and we have her draw this octagon on a piece of paper. And guess what, Michael? The paper is only this big, right? Well, she's got a protractor and a ruler, and she's got angles, and she's working advanced geometry. And she's showing us just how complex this is. And that's on a piece of paper. How do you translate that paper into 50 acres? How do you check your work? It's like the emperor's got new clothes here. Quit telling me that the Hopewell built this when there's absolutely nothing in the archaeological record. There's no measuring devices. There's nothing. There's no artifact. There's not one artifact that would show how the Hopewell or the Shawnee or whoever built this thing. And according to Richard Crowhurst, who I'm sure you know, Richard did a deep dive, wrote a paper on the Octagon Mound. He puts it far earlier than what modern day archaeologists. He says that this thing is about 4,000 years old. And I would concur with him, because America's Stonehenge, where we've created 2 films on it, and we might be going back up there because we've discovered some new and really interesting dynamics there, which people don't know about either. So, there's all these out of place artifacts. There's a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world. You're told what to say. You're told what to think. You're told when you go to Sacsayhuaman that the Inca were master stone builders. No, they weren't. The Inca built with head-sized boulders and mortar. That's a whole different deal. So stop lying to me. Stop telling me that this is the official narrative and this is what happened when you have no clue how it happened or who built it. That the builders just vanish in the thin air. And we see this over and over and over on a global level. Look at Göbekli Tepe. Why is that site closed down? Why is it buried? Why is it hidden away? Was it deliberately shut down? Look at Corral in Peru, oldest city in America, 5,000 years. Was it shut down? Did forces go in there, unbeknownst to us, and shut down Corral? Look at Teotihuacan. Why is it abandoned? Why, when you go back and look at pictures before the modern era, is it completely overgrown? They don't even know it's a pyramid, for crying out loud. They don't even know. Why is it America's Stonehenge that the sacrificial altar is buried? It's got vines growing on it. They didn't know what it was. Why is there a collapsed chamber? Why is the bell stone buried, in the ground in that collapsed chamber so it can't be seen? Why is the stone, May 1st stone, toppled down at America's Stonehenge, which is the only stone out of all the stones in the circle, which correspond to different geographical locations? Why is that closed down? Why is it that Menga, the largest dolmen area in Spain, we spent an entire day there by ourselves filming, why don't they know the builders? They have no idea who built this thing. We hear the story over and repeated no matter where you go. They still don't really know who built Stonehenge. That goes back and forth and this and that. The blue stones, these stones, those stones, and it's like the precision there. Stonehenge, England ties directly and inexorably back into America's Stonehenge. We demonstrated that. We showed that on Google Earth in our film, because when you go from the center of America's Stonehenge out to the summer solstice sunset, and you draw a line on Google Earth, and you continue that line, a person winds up intersecting the 2 trilithons, dead center, and at Stonehenge, England. It's not a coincidence. That line goes right through both of the trilithons. So they are angled to receive that line from America's Stonehenge. So how was that done? What you're looking at is spherical trigonometry. Spherical trigonometry. In other words, you've got to account the curvature of the Earth over thousands of miles. I mean, how is that done? How is that done, for crying out loud? So there's, and I say this in my show, there's a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated for the peoples of the world. Michael, you're looking for the truth. I'm looking for the truth. We all are. We're all trying to figure out where we are, how we fit in, what is this, what is consciousness, how does consciousness integrate with this little three-dimensional biological suit that I find myself in? Who are these entities? What's the agenda? Is there life elsewhere, or is this whole thing a holographic universe, and these entities are coming in from another dimension? And this is why we grope and we talk and we exchange ideas and we're open-minded and we're trying to figure out how do the pieces fit together. And nobody really knows. We've got conjecture, we've got hypothesis, and we're testing those hypotheses. But that's why we're on the trail. That's why we're discussing and talking and exchanging ideas and looking into all of this.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually. I think we are all doing the best we can to fit together some very complex pieces. So
very complex.
I just wanted to finish off, and we touched on this in our first interview, and so I just wanted to finish off by revisiting this and maybe having a little more time for you to respond and deal with that. And you've mentioned David Jacobs and his work, and his focus has been pretty much on these gray extraterrestrials and the abductions and the genetic experiments. And I agree that that's been happening and that it does represent a threat. But I know I've gotten to work with a lot of contactees, a lot of people that have had these beautiful, uplifting experiences with these human-looking extraterrestrials that ask for permission. They don't abduct people; they just ask for permission and give them the opportunity to come on their craft. And you go all the way back to people like George Adamski and Orthon. So, what's your take on this? Are we talking about really, two different types of extraterrestrials, one malevolent, manipulative, and the other very positive and benevolent, kind of like just as we saw in the book of Enoch, and that's repeating itself right now?
I mean, I've had, in 43 years, I've had one angelic encounter. It lasted about, I don't know. The guy came on a ski lift with me. And, the biblical narrative says that, hey, some of you guys have entertained angels unaware. So the story is this. I'll just give you the backstory, and then I'll tie it into Joanna Michelson's book, because she studied under a bruja in Mexico, and people were healed. But where does the source of the power, where does it come from? And so she wrote a book about it. So I was in a quandary, and we were skiing up in Mammoth Lakes. It was spring conditions, so the conditions were kind of, and I digress. So my wife Peggy is skiing on one part of the mountain, and I'm going up and down, up and down. It's a weekday. There's nobody there. So I'm just going up to the top, skiing back down, skiing right onto the lift, waiting for the lift to come around, pick me up, and up I go. I'm usually the only guy in the chairlift the whole morning. All of a sudden I hear, hey, mind if I join you? I go, and I don't even look. I go, sure, come on up. And this guy comes up. He's in a racing ski uniform. So he's really fit. He's got white hair and a white beard. He's really fit, really fit. And the ski has got all these patches from the skin tight ski, racing ski thing got patches from all these different ski areas. And he looks at me and he goes, this is his opening comment. How many days did you get skiing this year? I go, about 14. Oh, I've got 123. We'll kind of look over, that's every day, essentially. 123 days. So he goes, I guess you're still working, huh? I go, yeah, I'm still working. What do you do? Oh, I make documentary films on the Nephilim. I'm thinking to myself, here we go. Now I got to tell this guy who the Nephilim are because he doesn't know. I'm supposed to be on vacation. I don't want to talk about the Nephilim right now, but I will if I have to. He skips over that. He never addresses it. Flag on the play. So I go, he goes, well, have you ever heard of itchy boots like you wear in your feet? I go, no. Oh, she's got 1.2 million followers. I go, wow, that's way out of my league. That's really amazing. And now the seat, the chairlift seats 4 people. So I'm here and he's here, and these 2 seats are vacant. So we've got, you know, the chair like this, I'm here, and the guy's over here. I've never met this guy before, never seen him before or since. White hair, white beard, racing ski thing. He reaches over, Michael, and he grabs my shoulder and he touches my shoulder and he goes, "You're doing the right thing." How does he know that? And he lets his hand down and he touches it again. "You're on the right track." And then he touches it a 3rd time. "Keep doing what you're doing." By this time, I got UFO brain fog. I'm not thinking clearly. I'm going, what is going on? Who is this guy? How can he possibly say anything like this to me? I am lightheaded at this point, and I'm just kind of going, you know, what is happening? So all this takes place within 4 or 5 minutes of riding up a chairlift, and he's touching me, reaching over to touch me. You don't do that. People don't do that when they've just met you. And utter statements like, "You're on the right track, you're doing the right thing, keep doing what you're doing." How could he possibly know that? He doesn't know that. Who is this guy? And I get off the chairlift, and he goes, you know, past me and then down the mountain, and he goes, "By the way, that's the U.S. ski team here." And he fades, and I never see the guy again the rest of the day. And there's not that many people up there, first of all. I ski straight, and my brain is like completely scrambled. I'm kind of going like, what just happened? And that was the night where we came up with the show Supernatural Confrontations, all because of this one encounter with this guy. Because that's what I was thinking about. How do we make this new show? And we named it that night at dinner, Supernatural Confrontations. And I believe that was an angelic encounter. So Joanna Michelson is studying under a bruja, a witch, and she's learning how to heal. And she's watching people get healed. So it's a very complex mixed bag and very sloppy when we deal in anything supernatural. Because first of all, it's supernatural. And our laws don't apply. For instance, when Jacobs talks about everybody floating through the window, that's a future physics. He can call it that, and that's what it is. But these entities manipulate space, time, matter, and energy. So just because I appear to be benevolent doesn't necessarily mean, in other words, I throw this back to you. What's the litmus test that we use for this? You know, what's the litmus test? What's the protocols that are set in place to even ascertain whether they're benevolent or malevolent? Obviously, if you take a 5-year-old boy against his parents' will and you implant them, that's not a good thing. And we get that. But then to your point, how is it that some people have these wonderful experiences, or they're healed, or they're told of a special mission, or, you know, whatever? I get that. I get that. But if it's deception, is it, and this is I'm playing devil's advocate because I don't have the answer to it, nor does anybody else that I know of. If you're trying to create a deception, you're playing, you know, it's both the same side, but it's bad cop, good cop. That's what you're doing. That's conjecture. Again, until we can sit down with a tall white and get the cameras going and ask this guy 20 questions, you know, it's like.
Right. Well, you know, that is, that is a question that we have, is like, you know, until you get these positive human-looking extraterrestrials on camera, there's always going to be doubt. But, you know, certainly we've got, you know, a long list of people that, you know, testify that, yeah, they are positive and benevolent. But then again, as we know, that there's also the other side. So, right. Yeah, but I agree with you that, you know, we're all seeking the truth. We're all trying our best to put together all the pieces to understand it. And I think you've done great work in studying these archaeological sites.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I think people would benefit by taking a look at those two films that we just discussed, on the search of the Nephilim, on Ooparts, and of course the cattle mutilations. And so anything else you'd like to say, LA, before we finish up?
No, just, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, that cool heads would prevail. I mean, who wants to see this type of, I know I don't rejoice in any of this. I find it deeply, deeply troubling. But what was written will come to pass. What was foretold is unfolding right in front of us. So very interesting times.
Well, thank you, L.A. Marzulli.
Thank you. No more balloons. How does that work?
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.